So, I'm going to introduce the first speaker, who is Mary, who's the project leader, and she'll be talking to us about the consistencies and inconsistencies of Dunster's early buildings. Mary was inspired by Commander Williams. I'm sure you've all heard of Commander Williams. Back in the day, he used to do talks for SANHS about Somerset vernacular buildings. That was way back. Even I can remember him back in the 1990s. And when Mary retired from architectural practice, she began recording some of the older buildings as part of SUFBUG, the Somerset Vernacular Building Research Group. Since then, SANHS has set up its own recording group in West Somerset. And in 2018, an application was made to Historic England, who were able to give us some funding towards the Dunster Project. So the work to date is a result of this. So, over to Mary.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Lizzie. And thank you all for coming. It's really good to see so many here today. Today is a culmination of our time in Dunster with the Early Dunster Project, which has been a real roller coaster. It's been very exciting to record such early building work, but there have been a few snags along the way. We knew from a great many old records by Commander Williams of SANHS and from the work of Time Team here that there were a lot of early buildings. However, we had underestimated the amount of time needed to record such venerable buildings, which have been altered and added to and changed in so many ways over so many centuries. We're confident that the earliest and most significant properties have been covered, including the Castle Gatehouse and the Old Priory. Both of them very time-consuming, but particularly fascinating. The Gatehouse report is here today for viewing. I've left it out in the entrance lobby. The owners will receive a copy of their own property report, and the Somerset Heritage Centre and the museum here in Dunster will both have a complete set of the records. To date, we've surveyed around 35 properties, with still a few more later ones to survey, being those of post-1700 mainly. Because of the complexity of the work, we requested our first extension of time. Our launch was way back in 2018, and we are really lucky to have such an enthusiastic group of volunteers, as Lizzie said, with many different skills. Training was given by Historic England, and early surveys were great fun as, oh, that's wrong, sorry. Wrong way, that way. The early surveys were great fun, as you might guess from this photograph. Owners have been tremendously cooperative and hospitable. Sorry, I keep worrying. That's it. Owners have been tremendously cooperative and hospitable, and we really appreciate that. So all was going well, but then COVID came along and was a major setback as it held up surveys. When things eased up, the rest of the project looked overwhelming, so we worked in small groups to concentrate and focus on covering what needed to be done. Then, 2 years ago, we lost Isabel, who'd been of great importance to the group. She'd been enormously encouraging about the project and was very actively involved. She probably knew more about West Somerset vernacular buildings than anyone I know, and was a great asset to the group. It was very hard on us all, who appreciated her support and companionship. So, next slide is this one. Sorry, I'm not very good with computers. Right, well, I've called this talk Consistency and Inconsistencies. The consistency is because the medieval plan form of the open hall and cross-passage house is so prevalent here. We've identified well over 20, in fact Tony and I counted up before this, and we reckon there are 26 examples in the town, located all over from the far end of Park Street to the far end of Marsh Street. The inconsistency is the way that they have developed since then, with some of the strangest wall arrangements that I've ever seen, where they've been divided up. Let's show you one example. Is this one. There are flying freeholds, and then some have been divided up vertically, like this, and then some have been divided up horizontally, like that, and some are both horizontally and vertically. So it's been quite a puzzle working them out, basically. The basic plan of the three-room cross-passage house seems to have lasted here from at least the 1300s right through to the 1600s, though often with back extensions by then. The plan may derive from the earlier open halls with the hearth in the middle and smoke rising up to the roof timbers. In the centre of the hall, which might be separated from the cross passage by a separated from the cross passage by a screen in the early days. But from the open hall, an inner room would. As I say, I'm not very good with technology at all. Right, so here's the inner room. No, it didn't work. How do I get the pointer? Sorry. Well, you can see where it is, it's labelled. This was a private room for the family, and at the other end of the room, which here is shown as a kitchen, it's been called various names. It might be called the outer room, or it might serve for storage. Oh, thank you. Thanks. There we go. Right, there's the kitchen. So, I've called it various names, but as the outer room, it might serve for storage. In grand houses, it might be divided and be a buttery and pantry, a classic arrangement. Or in the rural longhouses, it will be accommodation for livestock. It's sometimes called the service room or lower room, and in many it later became the kitchen. This property was recorded in 1981, when it was still one house. But now it's two dwellings, and just about all of the houses have been divided in some way, with a staircase at each end. As you see in the next picture, these houses are pretty big, they're very long. This one is 14.4 metres frontage, which is 47 foot 11 inches in Albany. Oh, it looks like I've lost some slides. Sorry about this, I'm just trying to figure out where I am. The lateral stack, oh, here we are. The lateral stack, like this one at the front of the house, would have been installed later. These, of course, are very distinctive in West Somerset and Devon, but are sometimes seen elsewhere in Somerset, and I've also seen them in South Wales. There were a number of them in West Street, but there are only hints of them left now. Sometimes they show in the plan or the structure, or in the length of ceiling beams. In one case in West Street, there's a squint window that would have been in the inglenook. And in another, there's a fireback, which is now below a window. In 1498, there was an edict saying that houses with thatched roofs must have a chimney. This is an early date for their installation, which in Somerset is usually taken to be from the mid-1500s to the mid-1600s. Once there was a chimney, it became usual to start installing first floors, with the open hall often sealed over last of all, as it was a bit of a status symbol. Commander Williams noted in Dunster particularly the number of early houses with a lateral stack in the back wall, in the service or outer room, as well as in the front wall. This again features in a number of houses, early houses in Dunster, and would by this time have been, that room would have been used for cooking by this time, so it would have been a kitchen. The screen in the screens passage helped to keep drafts from the front and back door, which were opposite each other, and at the other end from where people were gathered in the hall. We have some good examples of screens. The plank and mountain screen, this one is in West Street, and it has an unusual carpenter's mark, which I think you can just make out there at the base of one. It's detailed here. As you see, the edges of the framework are all nicely chamfered with good moulding stops. Find the next one. In this particular one, screen, the panels are infilled with what would have been wattle and daub originally. In this particular one, you can just see the left-hand jamb of an early door frame here that would have led into the hall from the screens passage or cross passage. This is still very much intact, and you can see what the door frame would have looked like originally from here. This is from a collection of papers we have. If you should visit Tessa's tea rooms, you'll see at the right-hand side as you go in the remains of a screen which was infilled, and the mortises for the base staves are still visible in the sole plate. A lot of the evidence we have is fragmentary like that, and it's only by surveying the whole building that we can hopefully understand the pattern of development. On the other hand, there are quite a few houses where there are lots of features that will help us with the dating. This one is at 11 West Street, which we have used as a basis for our current display, which is in the museum, which is open today. It seems that there were a lot of commercial premises in Dunster, so the cross-passage house may have accommodated apprentices, servants, perhaps a workshop. At the high end of the open hall, there would be the inner room, as I said, for the privacy of the household family, and sometimes with a bedchamber known as a solar above. We have examples in Dunster where we know there are solars, and this is one of them. At the left-hand side, you can just see again part of an early door frame, and it still has pintles on it, so we know that the door opened inwards towards us. So we are effectively standing in the solar, and we're looking out into the open hall. The pintles are on this side, so the door opened this way, and so that suggests that there was probably a ladder leading up to the door there in the hall. The wall continuing above this, and the wall continues above this, and you can see that it was very smoke blackened when we first went in there. So this is the side that was the hall, and on the other side it was practically clear. So the solar was very effective in preventing smoke coming to you when you were sleeping, obviously. Now I've got another one. This one's a bit further down West Street, and the door frame isn't as elegant as the other one, but it's tucked under a jointed crack frame here. And again, there's a pintle still intact. So the door opened, and we can tell it was over the cross passage in the service room in this case. As we don't have long for this talk, I thought I would just pick out some of the most interesting aspects of the work we've done. One feature that you very occasionally see in vernacular buildings is the garderobe or medieval loo. Generally the cause of great excitement among vernacular building enthusiasts. Here in Dunster there is evidence of, I think it's actually 9. We have 5 in the castle. There are 3 in the nunnery, suggesting that this too may have been lodgings. And the one at the left-hand side is in the Luttrell Arms. It's just a door frame left there. So they each have very small windows, as most medieval windows were before glass became common. As you see, the space itself was tiny, and although this is a Victorian door, from the evidence it looks like the door is usually opened inwards, so you would have had to be very thin, presumably. The right hand, yes, at the left hand, sorry, I've changed the slide. The left-hand side is the door frame for the one in the Luttrell Arms, with another door probably to a staircase beside it. We can assume it's a garderobe because of its location, which was the Great Hall on the first floor level. So it would have been the most important chamber or bedroom when this was a house owned by the Luttrell family. So because it has a floor, we know it's later than the roof timbers, which were dated by Time Team to 1443. Continuing on the small window theme, if you look carefully at this photograph, you can see a relieving arch here for a much narrower window, well, a narrower window anyway, which relates to the earlier building of the gatehouse, which was in the early 1400s. These windows were put in the later 1400s, when the gatehouse became more domestic accommodation. So this is one of Meryl's fantastic pictures. She is here today, drawing, sorry. She's very meticulous. And at the Priory, we've got a rather similar style of window and another of her drawings. And it looks as though this would have carried on up, like the ones at the gatehouse. But it's now all slate hands, so you can't see any evidence there. We were lucky that Mark McDermott, who's also here today, kindly transcribed for us 64 probate inventories, dating from between 1635 and 1746. And a summary of these is available here today. They show a wide range of likely trades, and there were vintners here at an early date, suggesting a high-class clientele, perhaps not surprising with the castle at hand. Some also mention shops, which may have developed at the back of the house, like this one, which looks to me very much like an early, shop front. It's just beyond the cross passage and would have faced into an open yard here at the back. Other shops in these properties develop sometimes in the outer room of a house or the inner room, and workshops may well have been housed in extensions to the rear of the property. Our researchers, Barbara, who's giving a later talk, and Jill, have dug up a lot of information about families in Dunster, and Barbara has started an archive on this for the museum here. They've managed to match up a couple of inventories to particular properties, which is normally very difficult to do, and also some inventories for the Priory, which are in the exhibition in the north aisle of the church. If you're interested in this, there's a folder for, a container for information on the probate inventories at the back in the exhibition at the back here. But there's also one set in the Priory, on the Priory in the church, which is also open today. The glory of Dunster, though, is the number of fine roofs and early roofs. We've got 7 dated early roofs, and some dated, and possibly two more, dated to before 1400. Tony has made a special study of the roofs, which is perhaps the most informative of all aspects of the project, and he's giving a talk on that next. The inconsistency here is more to do with my expecting constructional elements, like roof trusses, to be all the same pattern in one house, as would be the case in a modern house. But it's not the case at Dunster, where we may have, in fact we have, an arch-braced jointed crutch truss and a true crutch truss all in one building. Even with different parts of the truss, there might be variations in the size of different members, where the timber available was trimmed or extended with great skill by the medieval tradesmen. Oh dear, I'm clumsy. Right. Very often, when roofs or parts of roof structures have been left intact, they constitute most of the evidence for the date of the building, particularly if they've been tree ring dated. The problem is that very often nearly everything else has been replaced. This is the Stag's Head Inn in West Street. The roof suggests it dates from the 1300s, judging by the roof, but it has a completely new frontage, probably early 19th century. Inside, if I can find it, particularly on the ground floor, there's only little evidence of where the front and back walls were originally. They are dotted on here, but that's assuming that the walls were at right angles to the roof trusses, of which there's one remaining upstairs. This early roof structure, in fact, continues to the building to the right of it, which is to the north. The roof continues on, and that's a different alignment to this frontage as it would be. So, dating is not a precise science. After all, 700 years is a very long time when we think of the enormous changes that there have been in housing just in the last 200 years. We can sometimes tell when a house has been updated, and from the evidence there seems to have been quite a lot of rebuilding and remodelling going on in the 1600s. This property, which is the former George Inn in High Street, had quite a bit of updating in the 1600s, although its roof has been dendrodated by Time Team to 1323. One of the things that seems to have been a fashion was to have a long row of windows on the first floor, and these two windows here were joined together. That set ran all the way across. We can tell that by the thickness of the external wall, which we can tell from inside. The feature may have been earlier, but the window frames are currently envelope moulded and quite chunky, which is typical for the early 1600s. We found a lot in this style in the High Street and also at Priory Cottage. And there's also a good 17th century door at the medieval gallery as well, though it's usually open. Windows and doors are often replaced, but if we have a house where you get, if you have a house where, where was I? If you've got a house with a few features that date from the same period, we can reasonably assume that date for the property, for its origins. This one is in the High Street, and it's got a much later frontage. It has one envelope moulded section of a window, so it's just sort of like that, left. And that's almost got lost in the later alterations there. There's also a door divided vertically with butterfly hinges, a type which is illustrated in books by the expert Linda Hall, as doors that she's identified doors dated to the mid-1600s. Next upstairs we've got the spice cupboard, which again they're very typical of the 1600s as well. And the roof joint is identified in the Southerberg Somerset village studies as being of 17th century. So putting all of those together, it kind of gives us a date. So it has been challenging, but also a total privilege to do this work. Thanks to everyone here who has supported us, and of course to our brilliant and skilled team. We've learnt such a lot in the process and intend to put together a more informative leaflet for tourists and eventually to publish a book or booklets after carrying out comparative and analytical work. That's very much an outline of what we've been doing. There's an enormous amount of detail apart from that. So do have a look at the exhibitions and the information that we have here today. Thank you very much for listening, and I will hand you back to Lizzie.
Okay, well done, Mary.